Here.
Yeah, excellent. Long time.
Hey Colin, how is McKinsey's chocolates doing?
Well, the summer is always very slow.
Mm,
We can't get help like everybody else.
uh-huh.
Well, we'd be happy to help.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'll go ahead and get us started. So greetings, everyone, and our guest. Today is June 18th, and we're celebrating Juneteenth. Being together on Zoom, we have some housekeeping that we need to take care of. So please mute yourself and any extraneous noises that you have. Turn off your phone to minimize distractions. And if you have a meeting role, go ahead and update that in the participation. And a very big welcome to our guest, Colin. And at this time, please welcome our club president, Ashley Weil.
Good morning, Toastmasters, and welcome guest Colin. This is my second to last meeting as president, so I'm so happy to be here with you this morning. As Rob mentioned, the theme today is Juneteenth. Now, it seems like most everyone here actually does know Colin, a former member, but Colin, if you could unmute yourself and just say hi and what made you come this morning and come visit us.
Well, once a Toastmaster.
Oh, it looks like you muted.
Did you hear that?
No, you got cut off.
Have I lost voice?
You go in and out of mute, Colin. You're on mute right now.
Well, how's that?
Now it's good.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to see how Toastmasters was doing. I spent so many years attending the club that I wanted to make sure you were still obeying all the strictures.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We are so happy to have you and looking forward to hearing you in table topics. We are going to start the meeting off with some inspiration from our inspirational thought, Mark Lipton. Please welcome Mark Lipton.
Thank you, Ashley. Toastmasters, Juneteenth. What could I really say about Juneteenth? A holiday now, a federal holiday, recognizing emancipation for a large part of our population. But when I thought about it, I thought about what's the basis of what we're talking about, and it's really people getting along with other people. I believe I've shared with you some thoughts I've had and experience I had with my mother's cousin, Leon, who lived here in Santa Cruz. And I used to speak with him frequently, monthly, and Leon had every right to hate other people, hate certain other people. He spent his formative years, his teenage years, in Dachau concentration camp. Anyone had a right to be jaded about humanity was him. When I talked to him about it, he says, people are good. People are good if you just let them be. So the problem is what we're taught by our governments, by our politicians, by our religious leaders. We need to get beyond that. The people at its core, at our core, are good. So fellow Toastmasters, you're good. We're good. Our neighbors are good. We just need to leave ourselves. And I charge you and charge all of us. Just be your natural self. Be good. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Mark. Next up is our Toastmaster, who I'm excited to see. Doesn't always get to come to the meetings anymore, but we're always happy to have her. Please welcome Emily Rosenfeld.
Thank you, Ashley. Happy to be here this morning. Today's theme is Juneteenth, a day that I actually knew little to nothing about just a year ago. And I have been educating myself throughout the year and will continue to do so. It is a day which commemorates the end of slavery in the United States, which took place on June 19th, 1865, years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed and implemented. I'm going to borrow words from Barack Obama as to why and how we celebrate this day. Juneteenth has never been a celebration of victory or an acceptance of the way things are. It's a celebration of progress. It's an affirmation that despite the most painful parts of our history, change is possible. And there is still so much work to do. And I think it's important to emphasize that we can hold both of those sentiments simultaneously. We can recognize how far we've come, and at the same time, acknowledge how far we have to go. Coretta Scott King put it best when she said, "Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it with every generation." And though long overdue, as Mark mentioned, just in recent days, Juneteenth has been recognized as a federal holiday. So we can see that there continues to be room for learning and progress within us as individuals, within our communities, and at the national level. So I'm glad we have the opportunity to have Juneteenth as our theme today, to weave it in this very big topic into our brief meeting. And I look forward to an open and thoughtful meeting with all of you. First up, to expand our vocabulary with the word of the day, please welcome Lori Bradshaw.
Thank you. I went back and forth for the longest time trying to figure out what word I wanted to choose for today, but here will be our word: freedom. A noun meaning the state of being free or at liberty rather than in confinement or under physical restraint. Exemption from external control, the power to determine action without restraint. And there's a couple other definitions there, but it ties in really well with our theme today because Juneteenth was created as a celebration of freedom. So try to use this word in your opportunities to speak today, and I'll keep a tally and let you know at the end of the meeting how we've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. And a very fitting word for today, freedom. To help make our meeting better, please welcome our 1-minute toastie, Scott Bradley.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. How can we improve our meetings? One way is to adhere to the transitions that we do during our meeting. Now, we have a lot of freedom as speakers in our meetings, but we must adhere to, as Colin said, some scriptures. When the Toastmaster introduces a speaker, as the speaker, it is best not to comment, correct, or elaborate on anything in that introduction. What you should do is just launch into your material and your presentation. Transitions. When finishing your presentation, in a live room, oftentimes you'll just turn, you'll say thank you possibly, and then turn and look towards the Toastmaster and say, Madam Toastmaster. This gives the Toastmaster a clue that you're done. Thank you, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Scott. Some very simple things that are very hard to do, those transitions. Thank you for the reminder. Up next, to bring some humor to our very early morning, please welcome Vicky Asunto.
Thank you, Emily, and good morning, Toastmasters, and special welcome to Colin. And I just want to say that as Toastmasters and a guest, Colin, you have the freedom to answer these questions or not. You have the freedom to answer a completely different question or make it up. Here you go. How do you measure a snake? In inches. They don't have feet. Did you hear about the first restaurant to open on the moon? It had great food, but no atmosphere. My teacher told me I'd never amount to much. Since I procrastinate so much, I told them, you just wait. What did the Buddhist ask the hot dog vendor? Make me one with everything. I had to read that one over a few times to get it. What did the duck say when it bought some lipstick? Put it on my bill. Why are crabs so bad at sharing? Because they are all shellfish. I know. Now, if you haven't had enough, got a couple more. Why did the giraffe get such bad grades? Because he always had his head stuck in the clouds. And why are frogs so happy? Because they eat whatever bugs them. Da-da-da-da. All right, fellow Toastmasters, I hand it back to you, Madam Toastmaster Emily.
Da-da-da-da. That's good. Thanks, Vicky. Oldies but goodies. Thanks for bringing those back. And next up to introduce his team, our general evaluator for today, please welcome Brian Morrisey.
Thank you so much, Madam Toastmaster Emily. To introduce my team on this very important topic today, it's going to be very interesting to see our results. First, I'd like to introduce our timer, Kathy Daigle. Our counter today is Steve Learman, as well as our grammarian. Our vote counter today is Scott Bradley. And our Zoom host, who is always prompt and keeping us going right at 7:15, is Rob Ross. And then I will be back toward the end of the meeting to do my general evaluation. And I'd like to turn the meeting back to Madam Toastmaster Emily. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. And now we turn our attention to today's speeches. Our first speaker is on the dynamic leadership pathway, doing the evaluation and feedback project. He'll be giving a 5 to 7 minute speech with a new take on a speech he has given previously, implementing feedback he had received. The title is Dividends Part 2. Please welcome Rob Ross.
Thank you, Emily. I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right. Dividends Part 2. What is a dividend stock and how does it work? I'd first like to talk about where this idea of dividends in regards to why I got interested in it. It was our initial family looked at some sort of investment that we could do as a family between my dad, my son, and my wife. I want to first start off saying I'm not a financial advisor. This is just a subject that's of an interest to our family, and that's where we're going with this. First off, we'd always look for a very financially strong company. Then we would look at the company's dividend payouts, say $50 a share. Then from there, we would decide how much money to invest and when the ex-dividend date is, which is the time when we'll be able to get that amount of money. And then from there, once that dividend date was complete, we'd look at other dividend stocks. So we were more of a short-term strategy, trying to make as much money initially as possible versus a long-term strategy, which usually people do when there's a dividend stock. What is a dividend stock? A dividend stock are regular payments out of the profit from a company made to investors who own the company stock. Now, not all stocks pay dividends. What is a stock? A company stock represents a claim of ownership on the assets and earnings of that company. For this reason, the company stock is also known as a share or equity. Company stocks have three main features: ownership rights, voting rights, and limited liability. Stocks are issued primarily to raise capital. Companies need money to expand their finances and their business. They obtain it by borrowing or by selling the stock. Now that we have it defined, let's look at how does a dividend stock work. So in this diagram, company XYZ pays a 50-cent quarterly cash dividend per share of its stock. This particular example, they pay it annually. Okay. Sorry, guys. There we go. So in this particular example, as I said, it's 50 cents a share. So investor A owns 1 share of stock, so it pays $2 annually. Investor B owns 20 shares of this stock, and it pays $40 annually. Investor C owns 100 shares of stock, paid $200 annually. Pretty straightforward. Now with that, there are 3 main types of dividends. There are cash dividends, where each dividend period, the company will pay into the investor's account a portion of, the dividends that's being paid out. Some companies will do stocks versus cash. They'll pay the investor with stocks each dividend period. Another one area that it is dividend reinvestment programs, DRIPs. Where this is that each period, instead of the investor getting the money from the dividend, they actually reinvest it back into the stock, and usually at a discounted rate. Now let's look at how often are dividends paid and kind of how it works. So the time frame from what I was looking at, it's usually either annually or quarterly are the 2 main where we see that it's being paid. Now, the ex-dividend date is the very important date because you need to own the stock on that date. So before that time, there's the declaration date is when the company will say when the dividend date will be and how much money or how much dividend will be paid out. And as I said before, you need to own it on that date, and that's where we're seeing ex-dividend date. Then shortly after, there's the record date, so it just makes note of all the shareholders and then pays out the dividends based on however their program is, and then the payment date. Why buy dividend stocks? Stocks that pay dividends can provide stable and growing income stream, right? Investors typically prefer to invest in companies that offer dividends that necessarily increase year over year and are outpacing inflation. So it's a more stable stock, and what we were looking at is somewhere between 7 and 9% a year. Dividends are more likely to be paid out by well-established companies that no longer need that money to reinvest back in their business. So where we see this is, other than my example of Apple, a lot of the tech companies or the very fast growing companies need as much capital as possible. So they're not paying out in the dividends. They may use stocks to get money, but they're not paying out any dividends. As you can see from my example, very stable companies, been around a long time: Exxon, Target, Apple, CVS, American Electric Power. So just very stable, well-established companies that have that money that they can go ahead and pay out in dividends. There's a couple different examples that we'll give you today as to, when you're looking at these, how to look at them. So a dividend yield, to evaluate, dividend yield evens the playing field and allows for more accurate comparison of the dividend stock. So we have a little example here. A $10 stock paying 10 cents quarterly, 40 cents a share annually, has the same yield as a $100 stock paying $1 quarterly, $4 annually. So in both cases, you're only earning 4%. The second method of evaluating is looking at the portion of the net income that goes towards the actual dividend payment. If the company is paying 100% or more of its income, then the dividend could be in trouble. The reason why we say that is because if the company is paying 100% of its income and say there's a dip in the market, where is that extra money going to come from? Because they want to keep the dividend at the same amount or a little bit more. So they may have to go into their reserves. So generally speaking, investors look for around 80% or below of the income being paid out in the dividend because they know there's more stability and the dividend will stay the same or get better. So in conclusion, to recap this, number one, I'm not a financial advisor. This is more a matter of interest of mine. We looked at how the stock dividends worked. We looked at the three types of dividends: cash, stock, and DRIPs. We talked about how dividends are paid out: cash dividend, stock dividend, dividend reinvestment programs. We talked about the reason why people invest in them. Then we talked a little bit about how to evaluate with the dividend yield and the dividend payout ratio. In conclusion, also, we've changed our family strategy. It's very stressful. There's a lot of other factors that you're looking at when you're buying these dividends. So we're looking more at long-term versus short-term games and just enjoy learning. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rob. And we enjoyed learning from you.
Thank you.
If we can all take a moment to send some feedback to Rob, you can just click in the chat there below and send it directly privately to Rob. We'll just take a moment. Okay, I'm trying to read everyone's body language to see if they are complete there and have had enough time. Give a thumbs up if you're ready for our next speaker. Fantastic. Our second speaker for today is taking on a new pathway, yet another pathway of presentation mastery. This is her level 1, 4 to 6 minute icebreaker. Here to reintroduce herself in a new way is a seasoned toastie with her speech titled Horse Sense. Please welcome Gale McCreary. Oh, and we have you on mute. So I'll have you reintroduce yourself.
Thank you, Emily. Good morning, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome, Colin. It's always so nice to have a guest with us, especially an experienced one like yourself. We, on these icebreakers, are trying to share something about ourselves, and you all know from other stories I've told that what I am passionate about is horses. But I've learned more about myself as I have been mentoring some young teenage girls in their world of horses. And I realized that this is a thing in our lives that determines and teaches us how to be responsible humans. I took them down to Saint Inez, where I have an old favorite French horse trainer. And he sat them down and he said, explain to them, girls, a horse is not your friend. A horse is not your lover. A horse is your slave. A horse must do what you tell it to do. A horse has to work for you. But most importantly, a horse must obey you. They were shocked. He said, think about it. Do you think after a ride, a horse wants to hang out with you? No. A horse wants to go back in the pasture and hang out with his friends. Horses are herd animals. They like to be with horses. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be good to them and that they can't really enjoy being with you, but your most important responsibility is to keep them safe, to feed them, to take care of them, and to remember that you are their leader. The leadership skill aspect of owning a horse is really important. The slave aspect of owning a horse was new to me. But he went on and he said, if your horse doesn't work out for you, you're going to sell it. And when you go to college and can't take your horse with you, you're going to sell it. And if your horse dies, you're going to buy another. And all of a sudden, the idea that we had this chattel, these things that we're so passionate about, and yet it's true. It was only since the automobile that horses have been pleasure animals. Well, they were sport horses and military horses as well, but pleasure animals so that we could enjoy our time with them. And that's what I do. I don't show, I don't compete, but I enjoy nature. I consider my horse my adventure buddy. Some of my happiest and some of my most tragic times have been with the horses in my life. As a youngster, only 12 years old, this is the age when things are extremely emotionally high or emotionally low. It's those teenage roller coaster years. I was riding my horse through a pasture where a fence had been removed, and he stepped into one of those empty post holes. And as he fell against the weight of his leg, it sounded as if a tree limb had broken from the tree and his femur shattered. What does a 12-year-old girl do with a horse that will never stand up again? She screams for help. And when the vet finally comes and puts this beloved animal down, she cries as if the tears will never stop. That, I think, may have been my lowest moment, especially as a teenager. And then years later, one of my most joyful moments was when my mare pawed the straw, laid down on the lawn, and delivered her and my first foal. And to watch that wet, spindly little thing make its way onto its feet and to its mother, and how my heart burst with joy for that. In fact, so much so that I now have a mother and two of her daughters. And that's where these two other 14-year-olds and I, that's how we enjoy the nature, enjoy the parks. I teach them, these girls, that horse needs a leader. That horse must trust you. That horse must do what you ask it to do. That horse must understand what you are asking it to do. And is that not true of everything in our life? The people, the animals, the businesses. And so I think back on what I've learned through horses, what I hope to teach them through horses. And you ask, why, Gale? Do you have 3 horses? Well, they're a family. You can't break up a family. You can't sell the offspring. Maybe having a horse is like being a very responsible and caring slave owner. I give that back to you to think about, and thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Gail. And I'm glad to know that you view your horses as adventure buddies, as all beings, including animals, deserve freedom. Next, we have our table topics portion. And this gives us a chance to speak extemporaneously. Please welcome our table topics toastie for today, Sandy. And I am a little bit ahead of myself. Please give some feedback to Gail, take a moment, and vote for best speaker today. Thank you for waiting, Sandy. And we'll wait for a thumbs up from the group when you've had a chance to send your feedback to Gale. Okay, great. Once again, please welcome our table topics toasty for today, Sandy.
Thank you, Emily. So as Emily shared with us, Juneteenth marks the day when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, taking control of the state to ensure that all enslaved people are freed. They came 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. So my question to you is, think about what I thought about is that must have been so challenging to not lose hope when that was first signed, and then you didn't see anything happen. When have you had to keep faith or hope when you didn't see evidence of change? I'm going to ask this to Ashley. You're on mute, Ashley.
Thank you for the question, Sandy, and apologies for being off video. I was working on my evaluation. I've talked about this before, but a time when I've had to not see changes right away, but have faith they're working is my journey with my mental health and my decision to start taking medication for that. I am now about 9 months into my journey with medication, and I feel better than I've ever felt before. I feel that positive things are also coming to me. I'm putting out a more positive energy and it is being returned. And I just think that for a long time I had hope. I held on to hope that wasn't my whole life, but things would always return those feelings would always return. And I really kept holding on to the faith that I would find myself and find the change that I needed. And it finally worked. And even once I started the medication journey, I still had to hold on to hope that it would help because it's not right away. And I'm happy to say that it was all worth it. Thank you for the question, Sandy.
Thank you for such a vulnerable share, Ashley. You're always good for those. So I imagine that was a slow progression of seeing the shift. And I imagine on this day of the freedom that it could have felt maybe like a pinch me type of day after all this waiting, and it was finally there. Like, is this really happening? Pinch me type of day. So my question to you is, tell us about a day, or this isn't a question, tell us about a day, a pinch me kind of day. Is this really happening, Mark?
A day that you want to relive, a day that you really remember. Pinch me day is what's really happening. We all talk, or we try to practice, or I try to practice about being in the moment. And this only really happened to me a couple times in my life, where things slow down, where if you were watching water, it actually seems as though you could see the droplets of water at a fountain. I don't know if any of you have had those moments. The birth of my first son. Focused, I can see it right now. That's 40 years ago. Watching the moment and meeting this new person, the joy, everything slowed down. I remember every moment, every action as I looked at him, went to hold him, and he peed all over me. And it was glorious. So there are those few moments, those pinch me moments, those times where you, I don't know, free yourself, have the freedom to break away from just doing and start being. Madam Table Topic Master.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, the birth of our children is definitely a pinch me type of day. And 19 years ago, I gave birth to my daughter today. So happy birthday to her. So I imagine also on this day, it was on June 19th in 1865, it was a high point, right? It was a high point, yet there was still, looking back, there was still so far to go. Colin, what is a high point that you can tell us about in your life? And looking back, it was a high point, yet you still had so far to go. There was a lot that came after that high point. You're still muted. You're still muted, Colin.
May the host help?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the thing that I would like to take that word of the day, freedom.
Mm-hmm.
You just went back on mute, Colin.
What I find with the present meeting is that there's a lack of freedom. And I've come back from the screen so you can see my whole body. And the meeting seems to me to be lacking energy, because it's like we're all sitting around a table and we're just gabbing. And I would like to see a little more energy. Now, I realize that Zoom is different from a regular meeting, but somehow or other, sitting on a chair seems to paralyze people. And I'm standing up and I'm standing away from the screen. And somehow or other, you know, gestures are important in any speech. But I'm really impressed with the way you've kept the format of a regular Toastmaster meeting, and you're trying to have the discipline of that. And I'm impressed with the speakers. So go to it, and I'm impressed with what you're doing. I return control back to the Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Colin. I appreciate you bringing up freedom. That's exactly where my next question goes. And maybe I'm going to use my hands more and free myself from this box. Yes, they were no longer enslaved, but far from free. Stephen, where is a time in your life, or where is a space in your life that you still feel you are not fully free? Where in your life do you still feel not fully free?
Thank you for that question. As you know, I grew up in Germany, and at that time, East Germany still existed. And I thought a lot about how those in the East didn't have a lot of freedoms. And I felt very thankful for all the freedoms I had. I guess it's kind of selfish, but in some ways, having children restricts your freedom from doing things. It's a balance between freedom and enjoying your kids. Thank you. Back to you, Sandy.
Thank you, Steve, and a good point. Yes, brings me to what does freedom mean to an individual? Maybe it means something around free to do whatever you want, right? Possibly free to do whatever you want. Yet this last year, a lot of our freedoms have been restricted. I would love to hear from Kathy. Kathy, regardless of our restricted freedom this last year, what is something that you've learned and taken away from that?
Thank you for that question, Topics Master Sandy. And good morning, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guest Colin McKenzie. I'm going to pivot back, if you will, to the hope question, your initial question. This week, Scott and I had a beautiful camping trip, a surf camping trip with our club, and we were down at San Simeon State Beach. And yesterday, on our way back up, we definitely beat the heat. It was quite amazing. And we stopped at Sand Dollar Beach, Plaskett Creek Campground area in Sand Dollar, do a little bit of surf. And oh, amazing kindness was my topic. And that we first arrived and another surfer dude was there in his van, and we discovered he had locked his keys in his car, blah, blah, blah. My mom's name is Gale. She's down the way on the left on the beach. And he didn't have any quarters, but he did have AAA and this and that. And so I went down to the beach, we gave him some quarters, and I went and said, "Are you Gale? Michael has a message for you. He's calling AAA, so you guys are safe." And as I talked to her, I asked, where is she from local or visiting? I'm in from Boston, visiting my son. And as I looked around, in the sand was this huge heart, and it said, "Kindness matters." And I didn't really know if she had done it until I asked, but then other people were walking by, and I was giving thumbs up as they read it. And then I went back to Gale and I said, "Did you do this?" She says, "Yes." And I have a story of a disabled woman who was on the street corner day after day, 365 days during COVID. We asked, "Why are you here?" And she was holding up a sign that says, "Kindness matters." She says, "That's all I can do," the disabled woman told Gale. "It's all I can do is hold up this sign for you." And every day she did that. And there is hope, and kindness matters. Back to you, Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Kathy. That is such a beautiful story. As you can tell, I'm going in a little deep with some of these questions. This next question is for Brian. Brian, how have you enslaved yourself at times in your life? This could be emotionally, this could be limiting thoughts and beliefs about yourself. How have you caged yourself in and limited your freedom?
Thank you so much for that question. That's a very interesting question. Yeah, I guess there's times when I have caged myself, so to speak. In growing up, I had very strict parents who kind of expected me to follow a certain path through life and get good grades in school so you can get into a good college, so you can get a good job and follow that progression as our ancestors have. And I felt kind of caged to follow in the footsteps of my ancestors, but yet I also have this free spirit inside of me that's just dying to, break the mold. Don't stay in New England like our family has forever. Go out to California, take that. I paid $80,000 for an education. And I came out to California and started with an $8 an hour job you know, and worked my way up from there. But, you know, I left a very powerful job in downtown Boston with a great graphic design job that had benefits and everything else. So I gave up a lot to try and break the mold to come out to California and really do something different and get out of my cage, so to speak. And that's kind of where my caged upbringing came from, but really excited to break the mold. Thank you so much for that question, Toastmaster Sand. Table topics. Back to you.
I'm excited that you broke the mold. We are all happy you broke the mold and that you're here with us in full form. So look, how much time do we have? 5 more minutes, is that correct? Okay, let's see if we can do a couple more. Where do you feel most free, Ken Bradley?
Where do I feel most free? Lots of places. I think that freedom is something that is not in short supply for many of us. We can go walk on the beach and feel completely free in this area. I think that these days, even going into a supermarket is a sense of freedom after the last year. So the way the world is starting to open up again, I think gives a sense of feeling free almost every day. I think for me personally, being here and having moved on from my career has given me a sense of freedom. I'm not required to show up at an office every day. I'm not required to do what somebody else wants me to do, except for Kate, of course. And so there's a lot of freedom in being able to choose the activities that I'm involved in. So I'm involved in a lot of volunteer activities these days. So I think freedom is not in short supply. And when we look at our lives, we can realize that even if we have responsibilities, we can see that life offers us a lot of freedom. Thank you, Madam Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Ken. Yes, I think some of us dream of that freedom of retirement. Also, how about financial freedom? Something we dream of, we maybe strive for, hope for at some point, some of us. Yet in that pursuit to succeed, it could limit our freedoms in some ways. Vicki, how have you seen success actually take away freedom?
Wow, thank you, Sandy, for that question and for all of the questions you've been asking. Possibly some of you have heard that term, the golden handcuffs. I know that my previous career, and as some of you also know, I used to look into people's mouths and clean teeth. I was a dental hygienist. The money was great. You know, really the money was great and the money went up as time went on. I didn't like it. I did not like it. So it would have been, it was hard. It was hard to be making money and having a lot of flexibility and then walking away from that, like I heard kind of Brian did. But I knew that I had to do something that I loved or that I enjoyed more. So then my process was going back to school. So again, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. I heard your question, but then I get sometimes like lost in my own answer of like going into another direction. I believe it's important for us to break free and break the mold and break out of the egg. I'm also remembering that I used to live in Texas, even though I'm from California, and I could have had a big house. I could have stayed married to husband number one and had a lot of money way back when in Texas. I didn't want to have it. I didn't want to keep straightening polyester shirts and having a men's clothing store that my dad had. I had to break free too. And I think that is the freedom that we in this country have, that we can make choices that completely change the course of our life. And I'm grateful for having that ability to have that freedom. Thank you, Sandy, for that question and all the others.
Thank you, Vicki. And even if you do go in a direction, your answer here was so inspiring. I think for all of us, you brought it around to something that I think we all could relate with and feel inspired by. Breaking free of what the path that was laid in front of us is important. Yeah, I think that's my time. Thank you, everybody, for your participation.
Thank you, Sandy, for some thoughtful questions and everyone for your thoughtful answers. We'll take a moment to vote on table topics. And now we'll turn the meeting to our general evaluator, Brian Morrisey, to introduce our evaluators for today.
Thank you so much, Madam Toastmaster Emily. Now we get to the evaluation portion of the meeting. Our first evaluator will be evaluating Rob Ross's speech, Dividends, Part 2. Please welcome our very seasoned toasty, Ken Braley.
You're looking at the wrong agenda, Brian. It's Ashley who's going to be evaluating.
Okay, sorry about that. I did print out the wrong agenda. Okay. Yes. So now who will be our first evaluator reviewing Rob Ross's Dividends Part 2? Please welcome Ashley Weil.
Thank you, Brian. Dividends 2.0 by Rob Ross. As previously mentioned, Rob revisited a speech he's already given to the club on dividends for his Pathways project. He gave the speech, and then we all, as members, gave him feedback, and he had an evaluation, and then he was able to try to apply that feedback and those evaluations and revisit the speech, give the speech to us again. Some of the things that Rob mentioned to me as feedback that he got that he was trying to apply in his second go with this speech was applying the context of his family strategy, having a stronger introduction and conclusion, and the addition of slides to help with the understanding of his content. Because of your improved organization, the addition of the slides, and that added context, I did feel that your speech was easier to understand and digest this go around. Personally, I'm someone who has a hard time learning just by hearing. I need the audio visual combination when I'm learning something. It's different if I'm hearing more of a storytelling speech, but when there's some actual content and knowledge that I want to get from a speech, I really gain a lot from the audio, or excuse me, from the visual aspect. So I really appreciated the addition of the slides. I do even think that was one of the pieces of feedback I sent when I saw your first speech, was that having something to look at would have really helped me. So I am very appreciative of you adding the slides, because I was able to connect, especially when you're talking numbers, right? It's easier to see that in front of you. The family strategy really gave us context for why you're even talking to us about dividends and why it's important to you and how you came to be someone I should even be listening to, even if you're not a financial advisor, right? And lastly, the organization. What are we talking about? The first time you gave this speech, I really felt kind of thrown into the content and then just taken out. And so there wasn't that transition of what are we talking about and why are we here to talk about it with you? So I think you did a really great job of adding that feedback to this go around. To improve your speech, if you're gonna give it a third time, I would recommend just leaning a little bit more into those things. I think the slides were really helpful, but they could use a bit more engaging features, maybe some colors or some more photos or something that just makes it just that much more engaging. And same thing with your family strategy, just adding a little bit more of like, has this brought you together, or have you found, like, has it, some side effects maybe of what this has done for your family? I know I'm on red, so the last quick thing I'm going to add is my challenge to you is to embrace the silence and lean into pauses. At the start of your speech, you don't have to say, I'm going to try to start my slides now. Just be silent until you're ready to start. And so embrace the silence. Thank you so much, Rob. You really took the evaluation and made a great speech today.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Excellent evaluation. Now to move to our second evaluation today, he'll be reviewing Gale McCreary's horse sense speech. Please welcome Ken Braley.
Thank you, Brian. Gale, I always look forward to your speeches because especially the speeches about horses, because it's a part of life that I don't have any connection with. And I love hearing the stories that you can bring. This was intended as an icebreaker. And so it was designed to give us a little bit of a look into you and your life. And you mentioned that you were trying to tie it a little bit into the theme of today, which I picked up when you talked about that the trainer down in Santa Ynez said that the horse needs to be your slave. That was a little surprising to me. You always are effective in delivering speeches. You had wonderful use of the camera, moving in, looking right at the camera, moving back a little bit. And I know we didn't get all of Colin's gestures that we were talking about, the kind of thing that you might be able to do more as an in-person. So that's something that we can practice if you want to, is to try stepping back from the camera, aiming it up a little higher and speaking so that we can see the rest of your body as well. I really liked that you talked about that you're mentoring a couple of young people, particularly with these horses, and that has helped you bring some of your own history and your own experience to them. A couple of tiny things I would suggest to strengthen this as a speech. When you first began, you talked about what an icebreaker is for, to help us get introduced a little bit more to you. Don't give us the preamble, just get right into the speech and start to say, horses have been a central part of my life, and now I'm taking the opportunity to introduce some other young people to the wonders of the horse life. Anything, just get right into the speech. I think that when you got to talking about the horses as a family, you could add a small point about just how they have helped you in being in a sense, part of your family. But it was a very effective speech in terms of giving us some specific incidents in your life of how they have brought tragedy and also joy. And so I appreciated that you're doing that. And all I can suggest is keep telling us horse stories, even if they don't make horse sense to all of us who are not horse people. Thank you, Gale.
Thank you, Ken. Now we will take a few moments to vote for our best evaluator. And while we are doing that, I will get to the general evaluation report for the meeting. I was very thrown off this week. I was traveling back east and I didn't check the schedule as I was off the week before. So I want to thank Emily, first of all, for filling in and picking up my slack. And it was Thursday, I was in the airport when I got the text from Emily, are you going to be the general evaluator this week? So I appreciate all your help and all pretty much doing my job, my pre-work job. So thank you so much. It's been, Emily's always on top of it when I work with her. Nice to see a guest here. Colin, thank you so much for coming. It seems like you have some history with Toastmasters here, and a lot of seemed like everybody knew you. So it's great to see a new guest here. Rob, thanks for always getting here and getting the meeting going at 7:15 on the dot. I felt really inspired by this meeting. I had no idea either what Juneteenth was all about. And we seem to hold that theme strong throughout the meeting. Sometimes we can go off track and go in different directions away from the theme, but I love to see the meeting hold on to that theme throughout. And it seemed in every aspect, you know, going from the inspirational thought with Mark and the definition of the topic, and Emily also doing a good intro on the meaning of Juneteenth, and even Lori giving us a great word for freedom. Is sometimes we get too complicated with our words and it's tough to work into our speeches, but freedom really held the theme, and it's easy for us to work into our speeches. Great transitions, great words from Scott Bradley about transitions, intros and outros. It's always tough. I've been doing this for 4 years and I'm still get all flustered when it's time for the intros and outros. So great suggestions there, Scott. Vicky, with your humor, your slapstick hit one after another assault of jokes, appreciate it. I know some people don't want to see more than that, but I always appreciate, you know, quick one-liners. So that was good. One thing I really enjoyed was I'm going to steal Emily's word for toasties. She kind of brought that up a couple of times throughout the meeting. And table topics, Sandy, I love the way you threaded. It wasn't just asking people question after question. You kind of threaded all the questions together, all the answers, really deep and thoughtful questions. Same with the answers. Everybody answered. This club is so great, and I'm really happy to be part of this club because everyone answered everything. Very thoughtful and precise answers, and very, again, stringing the theme throughout the meeting, and enjoyed this theme. Now to our evaluators. Ashley, great job reviewing Rob's speech. It's a very personal perspective. I enjoyed hearing. I think evaluations, the speakers do want to hear a lot of personal, how you internally process their speech. And you broke it down into segments. That is really effective. And definitely the engagement part, as Colin said, it's really challenging for us to be engaging up here as Toastmasters, sitting here in our chair. And like Sandy said, trapped in a little box here. And Ken, it's nice to see you have a history with Gale, and you can see you can get a history of her other speeches, so you can have that perspective as well for a lot of people who are newcomers here. And great advice to just jump into the speech. We do see a lot of time dilly-dallying around with intros into the speech rather than just hit us hard right from the beginning, just jump right in. So overall, excellent meeting. Like I said, very happy to be part of this group. And I will turn the meeting back to our Toastmaster, Emily, for the get to the awards. All right, thank you so much.
Yes, back to me. But first, I think we might be missing a few words from our evaluation team.
Yes,
Thank
sorry.
you, Brian.
I'm like,
no worries.
I just got back from traveling and I feel like I'm still, my head is still in the clouds here and I'm groggy. So bear with me while I make it through this general evaluating role. All right, first, let's hear from our timer. How do we do on time, Kathy?
Thank you, G.E. Brian. As we know, the timer has a lot of freedom, yet responsibility. Beginning with the IT, Mark Lipton, 2 minutes. Wordmaster Lori Bradshaw, 45 seconds. 1 minute Toastmaster Scott Bradley, 1 minute. Humorist Vicky Asanto, 1 minute, 55 seconds. First speaker, Rob Ross, 7 minutes, 15 seconds. Second speaker, Gale McCreary, 5 minutes, 40 seconds. The series of table topic speakers, we had first Ashley Weil, 1 minute, 38 seconds. Mark Lipton, 1 minute, 45. Colin McKenzie, 1 minute, 35 seconds. Steve Learman, 1 minute, 6 seconds. Kathy D, 2 minutes, 5 seconds. Brian Morrisey, 1 minute, 44 seconds. Ken Braley, 1 minute, 40 seconds. Vicky Asanto, 2 minutes, 6 seconds. And our evaluators today, Ashley Weil, 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Ken Braley, 3 minutes, 3 seconds. And our general evaluator report, 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Back to you, G.E. Brian. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for the times on all of our speeches. Now I'd like to move to our R counter and grammarian. How do we do on our Oz and grammar, Steve Learman?
I looked for so's, ahs, and ands. Or Mark had 1 ah, Emily had 1 so, 2 ahs, 2 ands. Rob had 1 so, 1 ah. Sandy had 12 ahs. Ashley had 7 ahs and 1 you know. Kathy had 1 ah. Brian, you had 20 ahs, 3 so's. Ken had 1 so, and Vicky had 2 so's. Some of the phrases I like, Ken said, going into a supermarket feels free. Emily said, very simple things that are very hard to do. Gale had a couple of good ones. Horses like to be with other horses. And I consider my horse as my adventure buddy. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you for the accounting and grammarian report, Steve. And now I would like to get to our word of the day. How do we do on our word, Lori?
Thank you, Brian. You guys kept me really busy today. I have a lot of tallies on my sheet here. I have 1 from Scott. I have 4 from Vicky, and also 2 of the word free, as well as the 4 for freedom. 2 of freedom from Brian, 1 from Kathy, 3 from Steve. And then Sandy used freedom 6 times and free 5 times, and also the word freed once. And Ken, 6 times for freedom and 3 times for the word free. And I also marked that Colin used the word freedom 2 times. So like I said, you guys did really well with the word today, and you kept me very busy and focused. So thank you. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you so much for the word count, Lori. And now I'd like to turn the meeting back over to our Madam Toastmaster, Emily.
Thank you, Brian. Groggy or not, you add a lot to our meeting, so I'm glad you're here. And thank you, evaluation team, for those great reports. I would like to announce the best of the best today. I don't yet see actually where those tallies are, so I'll
That's
give.
from me. I'm the vote counter.
Okay, sorry.
Got
I
it.
think I am also having my own moment here, so
It's a
I'll
little confusing with Zoom. And
I'll give the stage to you, Scott.
okay. Our best table topics award goes to Vicky Asunto. Congratulations. Our best evaluator award goes to Ashley Weil. Excellent job. And drum roll, please. Our best speaker today, Gale McCreary. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Scott, and congratulations to everyone. It was a great meeting today. I want to thank you all for your participation, your thoughtfulness, and openness. And I hope you have a good Juneteenth, whether you're celebrating today or tomorrow, celebrating progress and taking time to learn. So thank you all, and I'll turn the meeting back over to our president, Ashley Weil.
Thank you, Emily and Brian, for running a smooth meeting today. And thank you everyone for being here and being involved. Before I move on to announcements, I would love to ask Colin if he would be comfortable unmuting and letting us know how you felt about being here today, and for sure welcome you to come back to more meetings. Oh, I think you're muted. Colin, you're on mute still.
The host can jump in and unmute.
There's one observation I'd like to make. Everybody is turning the meeting. It is not turning the meeting. It's returning the meeting. I don't think I heard anybody return the meeting. They were turning it, but turning it where? Upside down? Right side up? Certainly, I enjoyed the meeting and you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. It was lovely to have you, and we're always grateful for feedback, of course. We welcome you to come whenever you want. We'd love to have you, so please come back and see us. One day we'll be in person. As far as announcements for next week, our theme is Pride, which was one of my themes that I suggested to Portia. So I'm excited about that. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Portia is the Toastmaster. Scott Bradley is the GE, and Vicky and Lori are our speakers. So that is next week, the 25th. I have I guess I have several announcements actually. I think that I know that there's a storytelling webinar tomorrow morning. I just saw the email about it, so I will forward that to everyone if they want to do a storytelling webinar tomorrow. As far as Juneteenth activities, I know that there's a big barbecue and a lot of events happening at the London Nelson Center downtown tomorrow afternoon. And there's also a paddle out, I believe, a surf paddle out. So feel free to reach out to me about any of those things if you're interested. Also, I don't know if everyone saw my email, but the following week, I have to be in Big Basin at 7 a.m. to make sure they don't cut down all our trees. I will be covering for one of my other coworkers. So I'm supposed to be Toastmaster on July 2nd, and I will not be able to be there because I have to be in Big Basin. So if anyone can take over my role as Toastmaster, that would be lovely. Let me know. And then my final announcement is that we are scheduled to have an EC meeting immediately following this. So if you can stick around, this will be our last meeting before we transition to our new roles. So if there's not a lot to discuss, mostly I think just that transitional period. So stick around if you can. And I think those are all my announcements. Does anyone else have any announcements? Nope. Okay, 8:30 on the dot. We did a great job today, y'all. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I will see you next week for Pride. If you're EC past or present or future, please stay on the line.
Thank you, Ashley, and everyone.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It was a great meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Vicky.
Yeah, you guys have a great weekend.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
Hi, Ashley. If you don't mind, I'd like to just update the EC on where we are in a property search that Scott and she and I have been pursuing.
Okay, great. Is everyone ready to chat now? Scott, are you